Greetings, and thank you for joining this installment of the Family Forum series offered by the Sioux Falls School District with experts from Avera. My name is Jeremy Mollett, and during this session, we will focus on the topic of helping your child resolve conflict. This session will include some helpful advice on how to find the root of the conflict and how you can help your child find a resolution. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. James Nold, Assistant Superintendent of the Sioux Falls School District, to offer a welcome.
Good evening. On behalf of the Sioux Falls School District, I again want to welcome you to this 9-part presentation that is titled the Family Forum Series. First, I also want to take this opportunity to thank Avera again for their partnership with the Sioux Falls School District in providing this service for our families. This is the 8th installment of the series, and we hope you have found the previous presentations and information to be of great benefit. You are welcome to watch all the previous presentations that have been recorded and are available for your viewing on the Sioux Falls School District Counseling website. You are also welcome to join us on the 3rd Tuesday of each month to hear information on a new topic. Each topic is intended to strengthen and support our families by providing information and resources that exist right here in our community. And now I look forward to hearing from our presenter this evening, and please do not hesitate to provide us feedback on the Sioux Falls School District website, Let's Talk app. Thank you again, and now back to Mr. Mollett to introduce this evening's presenter.
Thanks, Dr. Nold. We'll now move to the presentation. We're pre-recording this session, so won't be taking live questions, but we will leave some time at the end to address some of the top concerns we hear from parents. Tonight's program will be presented by Dawn Solik. Dawn is an outpatient therapist and licensed clinical social worker with Avera Behavioral Health. Welcome, Dawn, and thank you for presenting.
Hi, my name is Dawn Solik. I've been with Avera for about 2 years. I've been a licensed therapist for about 13 years, primarily work with adolescents and children and families in my practice. All right, so this evening we will be talking about helping your child resolve conflict. So we will go ahead and start the PowerPoint. So what we will be going over this evening is how can parents help kids deal with big feelings that come from conflict? What does problem solving look like with young kids? And how can we help kids learn to communicate better? No one likes dealing with conflict, but no matter how hard we try to avoid conflict, it's something that we all have in our life. There's going to be arguments, disagreements, for kids, for adults, for all of us. And so the first thing that we can do is teach kids how to tackle the big feelings that come with conflict. Part of what makes conflict difficult to navigate is the way that it brings out big, intense emotions that children may or may not have tools to process. Before they can address the problem that causes the conflict, whether it was a fight over a toy or like a betrayal by a friend, kids need to be able to place emotionally where they think before they act and lash out and make things worse. So parents can start by helping kids identify the emotions that they are having. Are they feeling anger? Are they feeling frustration? Are they feeling hurt, embarrassment? What are those feelings that they're feeling? So one of the things that I recommend and a lot of therapists recommend is using visual tools to help little kids identify what they're feeling. One of the first visual tools is actually a visual feeling chart. Typically, this chart shows like facial expressions that illustrate different emotions. You can make one, they're very easy to make. You can buy magnetic chart, which are handy that you can put on the refrigerator, which help kids identify exactly what they're feeling. It kind of gives that face to the emotion so that kids have that reference point. It also can help as an adult, if you kind of can show your child what you're feeling, using the chart as a family, using the chart in different times using the chart when people are not feeling just frustrated, but when we're actually doing things that are happy. That kind of helps kids get used to using a visual feeling chart. When children do therapy, we do a check-in right away, and this is usually what I use in my office to help kids check in with their emotions. There's also the stoplight, and that is kind of that visual red, yellow, green stoplight. It's especially helpful for little kids. If a little kid looks at a stoplight and points to the red zone, then those feelings are big and they're probably not going to be able to act in a way that's going to resolve conflict right now. Yellow means intensity of the emotion is beginning to kind of come down a little bit, or we're not quite in that red zone. And then when we're in that green zone, we're able to like act and engage and, kind of do some resolution and help the situation not get worse. And then there's also the emotional thermometer. This is something that you can easily Google. There's a lot of them out there. The emotion thermometer is a simple picture thermometer with numbers. And when conflict comes up, kids can look at the emotion thermometer and assess where they are on it based on a number. The children can also decide whether they need to calm down before proceeding. One of the suggestions that I also use, like I said earlier, is as a parent, as a therapist, we use these at neutral times to start with. When feelings are really high and very intense, it's very difficult to start something new for any of us. And so this is something that I would really recommend you start using with your kids just on a regular basis, that become very normalized in your household, or a normal part of their routine, so that when conflict does come up or we get some of those big emotions, it's not something we're trying to introduce then. When emotions are very intense, it's not the right time to problem solve the conflict itself. Helping kids come up with kind of a coping skill toolbox to use if they need to calm down in the heat of the moment. This might mean splashing cold water on your face, taking some deep breaths, or playing with a pet. Once again, these are skills. We call them coping skills. We work a lot with these with kids in my office. I work a lot with families with developing how do we put these into a routine. My biggest stress in this is that we can't start something new when we're really intense and we're really angry. That is not the time to decide that we're going to start developing a coping skill. So starting these skills when we are in a very calm, neutral place is a good way to make these a normal part of our routine, and an easy way to help kids when they're feeling intense, because then it becomes part of their habit. And the more that we do this when we're calm, the easier it becomes when we're really intense. So that's my big suggestion, is to work on these when people are in a very calm place. Once the emotions have cooled down, the next step is figuring out exactly what the problem is. Sometimes, especially younger kids, really struggle with that emotional awareness to identify the origin of the conflict. They might need your help to kind of understand why they're fighting with somebody, why they're actually angry, what's going on. Helping kids get to the root of the issue will make it easier for them to resolve what's actually wrong, and it gives them the tools to identify and talk about similar problems when it comes up again. Older kids in grade school and middle school are more likely to have language to identify the source of the conflict. So they might need a little less guidance, and they can learn to use these skills independently. the littler the kids are, the more they're going to kind of need some help with that language. They're going to need some help kind of identifying exactly what's happening, why they're frustrated, where the conflict is happening, and what's happening with them. The older the kids get, the more language skills they're going to have, the more they're going to be able to kind of be able to identify those feelings. So once the kids understand what the issue is, we start brainstorming solutions. Once the kids understand what the issue is, then you can help them practice finding solutions. Little kids in particular will need that adult guidance here. But even older kids and teenagers can benefit from having someone to kind of bounce some ideas off. A lot of what I do in my office with kids and families is we brainstorm. How are we going to handle this next time? What are some things that we can do differently? Where do you think the situation went wrong? You know, where do you think you lost your temper? Where do you think you lost control of the situation? Stuff like that. Brainstorming those ideas and kind of figuring out what we can do and then practicing. And once again, the brainstorming part, this has to be done when people are really in a calm place. When we're still really elevated, people are not going to be able to brainstorm well. So one of the problem solving techniques that I use is kind of problem solving baseball. So this exercise takes kids through the processing of thinking up and evaluating possible action plans. What I do is I kind of have the kids pitch me an idea, and then we go through bases. So first base is kind of what is the problem. Second base is what are some kind of potential options. Third base kind of identifies the best option. And then home plate is safe or out. Did you pick the right solution? The object is to help even very young kids understand what's going to get them closest to their goal. And when we start with the problem solving, and especially this one, it's like I tell them to throw out all the answers. Like, even if it seems silly, it's like we're just going to throw out all kinds of different solutions, and then we're going to work through what the best solution is. But we're not going to start checking off solutions until we get a really good list of different solutions. Brainstorm solutions. The smiley face rating, asking your child to come up with possible conflict resolution options, and then asking, is this behavior going to help you feel better or worse, or pretty much the same? Note that answering the questions using a visual rating, a smiley face, a frowny face, a neutral face, and then we look at all of our smiley ratings to help us decide which one is the best option. But also explain to them that it's not just about how you feel, but whether or not it's going to get you closer to your goal. So we're kind of using two things here where we're kind of having them identify like what is a good, what's a better option. But also looking at what their goal is, because conflict, if the conflict was with the teacher, like what does that look like to get closer to a goal? And so that we're doing kind of a little bit more brainstorming here. After we do some brainstorming, one thing is then we want to get some perspective. We want to think beyond this incident. If it's a close friend that tells a secret that you trusted with them, it's natural to be upset. But does that mean that the friendship is over? Encourage the child to the rest of the relationship in person. Consider the rest of the relationship with the person they're in conflict with, and remind them that one behavior doesn't define the entire person. So getting that perspective of, is this a good relationship? Is this a healthy friendship? And there was just an incident that happened? Or is this a relationship or a friendship that's not healthy? And again, this is stuff that I talk with adolescents and kids in my office a lot. We look at the relationship as a whole versus these individual incidents that happen. Putting yourself in another person's shoes. If you really want to acknowledge what the other person is saying, even if you don't totally understand why they're feeling the way and the way they do, and you don't agree with what they're saying, what they're describing in the situation, imagine the other person is feeling. A great way to help kids. Imagining the way the other person is feeling is a great way for kids to develop empathy. Depending on the situation, it might also make sense for your child to talk over the issue with the person and make a point of listening actively. Without interrupting or practicing these skills, kids can help resolve conflict in the short term and help develop empathy. So one of the things that I tell a lot of my clients is we don't always have to agree with people to understand their perspective. And we don't always have to agree with people to get along with them. We don't have to agree with everything that somebody says. And that's kind of getting some of that perspective. It's also a good idea to start working on why does the other person feel this way? And that starts to develop some of those deeper like empathy skills and helps the kids to start to see things from another perspective. Because sometimes in this age category, and it's very developmentally appropriate, they really struggle with seeing things from another perspective. So once we've kind of done these things, then we want to start figuring out how do we develop long-term solutions? How do we start to make some change and make some things different? And one of the things is practicing effective communication. And these are difficult skills. I mean, these are difficult skills for adults. These are difficult skills for kids. So the more that we can practice with our kids using effective communication, the easier that it becomes and the more it becomes part of their everyday language. And then when conflict does come up, it becomes something that is much easier to use. And it becomes something that they're able to kind of be able to use quickly, and it's a skill that becomes part of their everyday life. I always tell people, I always try to find things that people do every day. Like I have a lot of adolescents right now that go to the gym. And one of the things that I talk to them about is that you don't build muscle overnight. You have to, lift weights, you have to work at that every day to kind of develop that muscle that you want. Or I have kids that play basketball and we talk about, how they develop basketball skills. And I use the same kind of analogy to these skills, like practicing effective communication. We really need to do this in a daily practice with our kids and when things are really at a neutral time. So one of the first ones is using the I statements. These are big and these are something that we can practice with our kids on a daily basis is, I know you've heard it before, but it's still true, is saying something like, I felt embarrassed when you posted that on Instagram. It's usually more helpful when we start with something like, I felt embarrassed, or I felt angry, or I felt silly, or whatever it is, then you did this. You hurt my feelings. You made me feel embarrassed. And that makes other people feel defensive. And that kind of is going to escalate that conflict. Write out talking points. Even if it's just planning a conversation, this is a skill that I use in my office a lot. I use this with adults. I use this with my adolescents. Littler kids, this is a little bit more difficult. You kind of have to do the writing for them. But my adolescents, I will do this a lot, especially when we're going to have some big conversations with mom and dad, or maybe there's something that they want to say specifically to a teacher, or there's something that they really want to get their wording correct. We will write out talking points, even if it's just planning out the conversation in their journal, thinking it through in their head about what they want to say to get those points across effectively. I also I tell people a lot that we forget things when we're really emotional. And so if we can write out what we want to say to people, it helps us to get everything out, and it helps to kind of keep us on track so that we don't get off track in the conversation. And so this is one, like I said, I use a lot, especially with adolescents. They seem to really do well with this. And even my adult clients, I use this a lot. Littler kids, like I said, this is going to be one that you're probably going to have to do some of the writing for them and help them jot down what they want to put in a conversation. Role playing with an adult. Having a safe space to practice tricky conversations can be huge. It can also give your child the insight into nonverbal communication that they may not be aware of. What you said, and then you can give them that feedback. You know, what you said was really kind, but it was harder to hear. You know, we really, you know, you were looking at the ground. You know, sometimes we don't understand where our tone is. One of the things that happens a lot, especially with my adolescents, is that they tend to not understand their tone. They also don't understand, there's a lot of nonverbal communication that the adolescents are using with texting, Snapchat, you know, all of these different things. And so sometimes when we can kind of listen to what they have to say and then give them feedback on some of their nonverbal language, that can really help them have these conversations in an effective way. And this is another one where it's like if they have to have some of those more difficult conversations or with people who may be intimidating to them, having this role playing can help them feel really secure in that, and they can really get out what they need to say, and then they feel like it doesn't come out in a conflict. The other thing is this kind of gives them a chance. One of the questions I ask them a lot when we do role playing is there somebody that you want to be with you in the conversation? Would you feel better if mom or dad were there? Would you feel better if the teacher were there? Would you feel better if you had your guidance counselor there? And then that way they can verbalize like who they want there and how they want the conversation to go. And that helps with that conflict piece so that they don't feel like they're kind of put on the spot and they have to say all of this stuff on their own. So role playing can be a really powerful way to kind of help kids with conflict. And we can also use some different scenarios and help them kind of practice some skills in a safe place so that when they have to do them in the hallway or they have to do them at a baseball game or wherever they're at, they have these skills kind of in their back pocket. So that's a really good one to use. And kind of the last thing that I always tell parents, and this is a big one that I talk to parents a lot about, and I do talk to some teachers about and people that work with kids, is one of the biggest things that we can do to help your child learn conflict resolution is show them how it's done. When kids are experiencing the world, especially your own child, when you are doing some of these things and you're modeling good conflict resolution, it's going to be much easier for your child. They're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna make mistakes, but when we show kids that it's really easy, that it's doable, even when it's hard, they're able to do it better. They're able to kind of show those skills. And that's why kind of throughout the PowerPoint, I've kind of talked about how we do these things in neutral times. Because the more we get into these practices in neutral times, it's going to be a lot easier for kids, adolescents to do these things when they're having those really high intensity emotions. And when the other part is when I talk about modeling what you want to see, one of the things too is look at your own behavior sometimes. If, you know, kids will tell me, adolescents, I will hear in my office that, you know, mom and dad get really frustrated, or that mom and dad don't handle conflict very well, or that, you know, I hear a lot of things in my office. And so when we're showing our kids that we're not handling conflict well, then they're going to model that behavior. And so the more that we can figure out how to keep ourselves calm and how to handle conflict in a productive way, our kids are going to do kind of the same. So that's kind of what I have for this evening. And I hope that some of this information was helpful. Thank you very much.
Dawn, thank you for that information. That was great information for our parents and families. A couple questions that we would have here are potentially, with our high school and middle school students and even elementary students, they go through so many different changes as they're coming through their school years. What are some of those key signs that a parent may look for, or things that would stand out to a parent that would help them to know that their child's going potentially through some conflict, that they would really want to sit down then and have a conversation with their child? But what are some of those key signs they would see?
One of the first things that I tell parents is change in behavior. If we start to see that, for instance, your child is comfortable going to school and now all of a sudden they're not, they're having an increased anxiety going to dance, they are starting to show some signs of being anxious in a particular class, or they start kind of talking about not like, I want to drop dance, I want to drop football. Those are some of the big signs that we want to start having some of those conversations. What's happening? What's going on? Is it that they're losing interest in dance, or is there some conflict going on? Same thing with a change in school. I get a lot of kids in my office where it's like all of a sudden they're not transitioning to school. They don't want to get on the bus. What's happening? So having those conversations. That's the biggest one that I tell parents to look for with kids, especially adolescents, and especially, well, actually all kids. I would just say all kids, is that change in behavior. But one of the big suggestions that I'm going to give parents is the more that we have these conversations neutrally every day. How's your day going? What's happening? And I know adolescents don't like to talk about those things, but the more that we kind of have those conversations, we're going to pick up on all of a sudden there's a change in a friendship. There's a change with a teacher. There's a change with a class, some of those things. So I would say first off is watching for changes in your child, and then just having those conversations neutrally.
Thank you for that response. And one other question that we'd have here is, if a parent really sat down with their child and it starts to appear to them that it's something they may not be prepared to handle, and they're just not comfortable handling that conversation, or it's bigger than they feel they can handle, what would you recommend? Who should they reach out to, and who should they talk to make sure that their child gets the help they need?
I would start with the school. They are kind of the front line people who are seeing your child a lot, and they see these conflicts. So I would start, reaching out to the teacher, reaching out to the school counselor. Those are two really good resources right in the school. They usually have a really good pulse of what's going on in the school and what's going on with different kids and what's going on with different groups. So those would be the first two places that I would start. If it's in another place, I would start with, hey, with your dance teacher, hey, is there anything you've noticed different? Just starting with some of those people who are, involved in the direct situation. If then you feel like it's something that you maybe need to take outside of the school or outside of the organization where the conflict has started, then maybe it's reaching out to a professional and seeing if, this is a time where maybe your child needs some counseling, or maybe we need some family counseling, or just someone to kind of help guide the family a little bit more and how to put some of these skills in place.
Thanks to Dawn for presenting tonight's session on resolving conflicts. Our next session will focus on what community resources are available during the summer months. This will be presented on May 16th from 6 to 7 p.m. and login information will be under the Counseling Services area of the Sioux Falls School District's website. Thank you for joining us and have a great night.